Greetings all, my name is Tom Laspisa and I'm the author of my fantasy novel The Agra Saga. Welcome to Mythmaker. Today I have something rather special to share that changed my view of what fantasy stories could be. The tale I have for you today is perhaps the quintessential example of what is known as the sword and sorcery subgenre of fantasy, and also a key example of what early 20th century fantasy was like, apart from Narnia and The Lord of the Rings. With that in mind, we'll be diving deep into the Hyborian Age to discuss the one and only Robert E. Howard, who helped shape the foundations of fantasy in the 1930s. As a contemporary of authors like H.P. Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith, Howard created a range of characters like Solomon Kane, Kull, and Bran Mak Morn. But he's most well known for his iconic character of Conan, of course. And even though it's difficult to name the perfect Conan tale, my choice for the best fantasy story that you've probably never read is Red Nails. Now, the character of Conan is far more than just dumb muscle. Don't get me wrong, there are dumb muscle moments for sure, but he is also very cunning, resourceful, and he possesses a rather interesting code of honor held only by barbarians, which civilized men simply cannot comprehend. So, piece by bloody piece, let's dissect the story of Red Nails, explore the city of Zucatl, and uncover the secrets of what makes sword and sorcery tick. Later on in the video, I'll even share some writing techniques to help you write your own sword and sorcery fiction. First, let's take a closer look into the heart of the sword and sorcery genre. Sword and sorcery is a subgenre of fantasy literature that is characterized by an exhilarating blend of action, mystery, and horror. Stories are often rooted in ancient worlds filled with magic, larger-than-life heroes, and sometimes even futuristic technology appearing as magical artifacts. Readers are transported to realms where danger lurks around every corner, and the clash of steel and magic shapes the fate of civilizations. Since the genre initially took hold in pulp magazines like Weird Tales, stories are usually designed to be intense and fast-paced to keep readers on the edge of their seats. There are very few long and drawn-out descriptions here. Unlike its high fantasy counterpart, sword and sorcery often eschews sprawling epics in favor of more tightly focused narratives that plunge readers directly into the thick of character-centered conflicts. The genre is characterized by its vivid depictions of ancient landscapes, teeming with magic and peril. From the shadowy streets of decadent cities to the untamed wilderness of uncharted lands, sword and sorcery settings are richly detailed and steeped in atmosphere with very condensed and punchy descriptions. Magic is typically portrayed as something dark and dangerous, and often exacts a heavy toll on those who wield it, with sorcerers and witches likely being villains or, at the very least, slightly insane. Some notable authors have left their defining mark on the genre and defined it as we know it today. Robert E. Howard is one, but Michael Moorcock's Elric of Melniboné series offers a darker, more introspective take on sword and sorcery that explores themes of fate, morality, and the corrupting influence of power. Fritz Leiber's Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser series injects a dose of humor and camaraderie into the genre as it follows the exploits of two roguish adventurers as they navigate the treacherous streets of Lankhmar. Though not a sword and sorcery author himself, Lovecraft also had an influence on the genre as he was a friend of Howard's, and Howard would end up introducing the Lovecraftian mythos into some of the Conan stories, enriching them with a touch of cosmic horror, namely in stories like The Tower of the Elephant. The influence of sword and sorcery extends far beyond that of literature, since it helped shape popular culture and inspired countless works in other media, including Dungeons & Dragons in the 1970s and other role-playing games. So why should you read Red Nails? I think it's because the story exemplifies the defining characteristics of sword and sorcery as a whole. Howard blends brooding mystery, dynamic characters, and high-octane action, and it's this mix of uncomfortable intrigue and intense combat that elevates Red Nails to a top-tier short story. As Stephen King put it himself, Howard's writing seems so highly charged with energy that it nearly gives off sparks. Fantasy stories nowadays can sometimes feel tethered to well-worn cliches, but Howard's narrative offers a breath of fresh air despite its age. It offers many of the tropes that satisfy that fantasy craving while retaining a unique flavor that isn't as often explored or read today. The characters of Conan and Valeria are actually quite well-rounded with their own goals and beliefs, and both the setting and other characters that they encounter are wild, weird, creepy, and full of history. I will say that if you've never read a Conan story before, there are a few elements that may seem politically incorrect by today's industry standards, but I strongly encourage you to read through that and enjoy the story for everything great that it has to offer. I firmly believe that it is well worth it. Plus, it's in the public domain and completely free to access and read online, so there's no excuse not to just give it a try. Now we'll examine the techniques Robert E. Howard uses to make Red Nails a standout in the genre. Character depth is hallmark of Howard's storytelling prowess, despite the limitations of the short story format, which is evident in the vibrant personas of Valeria and Conan. Valeria is a fierce adventurer and pirate, while Conan is the iconic barbarian with a complex blend of strength and cunning. Here's a description of Valeria at the beginning of the story. Against the background of somber, primitive forest, she posed with an unconscious picturesqueness, bizarre and out of place. She should have been posed against a background of sea clouds, painted masts, and wheeling gulls. There was the color of the sea in her wide eyes, and that was as it should have been, because this was Valeria of the Red Brotherhood, whose deeds are celebrated in song and ballad wherever seafarers gather. And here's another example of her battle-hardened intuition that alerts her to possible danger nearby. Her foot had struck something in the litter of blown dead leaves which carpeted the shelf. She kicked them aside and looked down on the skeleton of a man. She ran an experienced eye over the bleached frame, but saw no broken bones, nor any sign of violence. The man must have died a natural death, though why he should have climbed a tall crag to die, she could not imagine. Now let's compare that to a passage that illustrates Conan's resourcefulness once the two of them run into a dinosaur trying to eat them. Gathering the sticks in a compact bundle, he wedged his poniard hilt between them at one end. Then with the vines he bound them together, and when he had completed his task, he had a spear of no small strength, with a sturdy shaft 7 feet in length. "What good will that do?" she demanded. "You told me that a blade couldn't pierce his scales." "He hasn't got scales all over him," answered Conan. "There's more than one way of skinning a panther." Moving down to the edge of the leaves, he reached the spear up and carefully thrust the blade through one of the apples of Derketa, drawing aside to avoid the darkly purple drops that dripped from the pierced fruit. Presently he withdrew the blade and showed her the blue steel, stained a dull, purplish crimson. "I don't know whether it will do the job or not," quoth he. "There's enough poison there to kill an elephant, but, well, we'll see." These two represent masculine and feminine sides of the same warrior archetype. While Conan uses heavy, crushing blows, Valeria uses her expert swordplay and finesse to her advantage. While Conan's resourcefulness lies in his primal survival instincts, Valeria's resides in her street smarts. These traits are not mutually exclusive, and of course both characters seek treasure and adventure, but their distinctions play off of each other in a really interesting way. Howard also infuses intrigue into nearly every crevice of this story. The city of Zucatl itself is almost dreamlike in its presentation. It's a mysterious and ancient battleground concealed within jade walls. They were not looking into an open street or court as one would have expected. The opened gate or door gave directly into a long, broad hall which ran away and away until its vista grew indistinct in the distance. It was of heroic proportions, and the floor of a curious red stone cut in square tiles that seemed to smolder as if with the reflection of flames. The walls were of a shiny green material. Here's another description shortly after. She wondered how many centuries had passed since the light of outer day had filtered into that great hall through the open door. Sunlight was finding its way somehow into the hall, and they quickly saw the source. High up in the vaulted ceiling skylights were set in slut-like openings, translucent sheets of some crystalline substance. In the splotches of shadow between them, the green jewels winked like the eyes of angry cats. Beneath their feet, the dully lurid floor smoldered with changing hues and colors of flame. It was like treading the floors of hell, with evil stars blinking overhead. This atmospheric, sealed city is not just a backdrop, but almost like a living, breathing character in its own right, evoking a sense of wonder and foreboding. Howard also doesn't give us a reason for every last detail all at once, but rather hints at greater secrets by providing information as the characters encounter it. This is important to consider when writing your own stories if you want to pull your reader alongside your characters. Aspiring writers can take a cue from Howard's descriptions, understanding that a well-crafted setting isn't merely a stage, but an active piece in the narrative puzzle. The narrative pace in Red Nails is like a river, winding, bending, rushing, and easing, but never stagnating. Howard achieves this by integrating enticing mystery with visceral action into the plot. Scenes like the confrontation with the dinosaur or dragon in the beginning, the entrance into the city of Zucatl, the brooding encounters with a monster in the city, and clashes with tribal troops draw the reader in by using actively descriptive language while leaving just enough for the imagination to fill in further gaps. This interplay of suspense, action, and resolution propel the story forward and serves as a very nice and easy format for writers to follow when trying their hand at this genre. Howard's writing style is rather vibrant and straightforward. It's descriptive without being flowery. For instance, the bizarre twilight city of Zucatl, enclosed by an emerald dome, is not just seen, but felt. Aspiring authors can learn from Howard's ability to engage the senses to create an immersive experience filled with fear, dread, and intrigue. To dive deeper into examples, I have to warn you that there will be spoilers. So, if you've already read Red Nails for yourself, or you don't mind a peek behind the curtain, then feel free to stick around, but I highly recommend that you read the story for yourself first. If you want to skip past the spoilers, then please click the time posted on the screen. Alright, let's delve into some more specific examples and techniques used in Red Nails that can help us better understand the sword and sorcery genre, and maybe even add some grit and efficiency to our writing. Fear and dread are other crucial elements in both Sword and Sorcery and Red Nails. Descriptions are typically kept short and with just enough ambiguity to let the imagination fill in the horrific details. This is a rule in horror. It's best to keep the monster or threat hidden in shadows and mystery than to show it in full. Let's look at a couple examples of this in action. In the shadows beneath the balcony, a ghostly light began to glow and grow. A light that was not part of the firestone gleam. Valeria felt her hair stir as she watched it, for, dimly visible in the throbbing radiance, there floated a human skull, and it was from the skull, human yet appallingly misshapen, that the spectral light seemed to emanate. It hung there like a disembodied head, conjured out of night and the shadows, growing more and more distinct, human and yet not human as she knew humanity. The line, human and yet not human, lets the reader imagine something awful, rather than wasting time and energy trying to describe something horrible. Then, later as Conan and Valeria are escaping a fight in the halls of the city, we get this example. His hand came out of the dark and caught Valeria's wrist as she stumbled blindly on the steps. She felt herself half dragged, half lifted up the winding stair, while Conan released her and turned on the steps, his ears and instincts telling him their foes were hard at their backs, and the sounds were not all those of human feet. And shortly after, we get this. A glance over his shoulder, just as the door was closing, showed Conan the long, dim vista of the hall, and dimly framed at the other end, an ophidian shape that writhed slowly and painfully into view, flowing in a dull-hued length from a chamber door, its hideous, blood-stained head wagging drunkenly. Then the closing door shut off the view. Here we see a negative description, or rather a description of what the creature is not, which allows the imagination to kind of run wild with what the monster could be. The same is true of the vague details that we get in the last section, where we get only hints of the monster. This is excellent for ramping up suspense and creepiness. I also want to highlight the style of Howard's combat descriptions. Up went the sword again, with a low, beast-like cry of triumph, and then a giant form loomed behind the Xotalanc, and steel flashed like a jet of blue lightning. The cry of the warrior broke short, and he went down like an ox beneath the poleaxe, his brains gushing from his skull that had been split to the throat. Everything here is quick, clear, cause and effect, but with richly visceral detail. Howard invokes the senses in several ways in just a few words. There's no need for a prolonged play-by-play of combat. Keep it short, keep it brutal, but be sure to describe the nature of the attack as well as the consequences, but the exact details of how are not always necessary. Let's look at a few more character descriptions and interactions. These unfold in Red Nails with an excellent use of tension. First is an extremely punchy description of Teskela, the Queen of Zucatl. In her eyes alone of all the dark-skinned people, there lurked no brooding gleam of madness. She spoke no word after her first exclamation. She stood tensely, her hands clenched, staring at Valeria. Here we see that she's different from the other mad inhabitants of the city, in that she clearly has a beef with Valeria, but we don't yet know why. This to me is a perfectly efficient character description that shows Teskela as the characters see her. We get just enough to invite questions about her character without overdoing it. Remember to describe your characters doing something that speaks of a deeper aspect of their character. Physical description is good, but the nature of a character can be described with verbs. The climax of the story, where Teskela aims to drain Valeria's life force and the mad wizard Tolkemec returns, becomes a crescendo of sword and sorcery elements. You've got an altar sacrifice, a mad wizard, a wild slaughter, and Conan winning the day in a desperate, bloody struggle. Howard's vivid descriptions, coupled with the impending doom, elevate the stakes. As Tolkemec returns with destructive magic, Teskela's ceremony transforms into a battleground of sorcery, steel, and desperation. I think the description of Tolkemec is one of my favorites before he starts incinerating everyone in the room with red lightning. It was a man, with a tangle of white hair and a matted white beard that fell over his breast. Rags only partly covered his gaunt frame, revealing half-naked limbs strangely unnatural in appearance. The skin was not like that of a normal human. There was a suggestion of scaliness about it, as if the owner had dwelt long under conditions almost antithetical to those conditions under which human life ordinarily thrives. And there was nothing at all human about the eyes that blazed from the tangle of white hair. They were great, gleaming discs that stared unwinkingly, luminous, whitish, and without a hint of normal emotion or sanity. The mouth gaped, but no coherent words issued, only a high-pitched tittering. Here we get several sensory descriptions, like the crazy look of the old man, and the creepy, scaly texture of his skin, and the unsettling sounds he makes. Writers, allow Red Nails to serve as a guidebook for you as you seek to write your own stories with the same vigor and mystique. So let's recap some elements of sword and sorcery and how you can incorporate them into your own fiction. Number 1. Set the appropriate tone. Describe everything in your story with grit. The reality of humanity is on full display with both virtue and vice. Magic is usually a force of evil or otherworldly powers beyond human comprehension. Monsters can cause insanity simply by being in the same room. Explore themes of power, betrayal, madness, redemption, etc. Number 2. Develop compelling characters with distinct traits and motivations. Create character profiles detailing their backstory, personality traits, goals, and conflicts. Occupations typically fall into those of the warrior, explorer, treasure hunter, etc. Number 3. Create settings that evoke a sense of wonder and foreboding. Utilize descriptive language to vividly portray the environment, engaging multiple senses to immerse readers in the setting. Try showing contrasting elements of beauty and danger to create a dynamic atmosphere that evokes both awe and fear. Number 4. Create intrigue by gradually unveiling layers of mystery and ancient lore. Use foreshadowing to hint at upcoming events or revelations. Introduce mysteries early in the story and gradually reveal their significance as the plot unfolds. Number 5. Maintain a compelling pace by integrating suspense with visceral action. Alternate between moments of high tension and quieter, reflective scenes. Use cliffhangers, unexpected plot twists, and efficient, punchy language to keep readers turning pages. Number 6. Draw readers in with descriptive language that engages multiple senses. For the most part, show, don't tell. Use vivid imagery, sensory details, and active verbs. For instance, don't say, "He was angry at the monster's attack." Rather, say, "He gritted his teeth and saw red upon feeling his forearm snap within the beast's jaws." Number 7. Evoke fear and dread through concise, evocatively vague descriptions. Use suggestive language and leave some details to the reader's imagination to enhance suspense and fear. Tap into universal fears and desires. Focus on conveying the emotional impact of the scene rather than providing exhaustive descriptions. Red Nails serves as an excellent blueprint for nearly all fast-paced sword and sorcery tales. I know I really enjoyed it, and I hope you will as well. Also, if you're a fan of fantasy adventure novels and you want to support what I do here, then please pick up a copy of my book, The Agra Saga, by clicking on the link in the description box. I was inspired by a lot of sword and sorcery when I wrote this, so I hope you enjoy it. If you want more analyses on stories and characters from some of your favorite books, shows, movies, and games, then please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, Godspeed and happy writing.